As future educators, it is important that we acknowledge the impact of first impressions in the education setting. As we learned in the beginning of this semester from this story, 3 Letters from Teddy, it is important to get to know our students before we pass judgment on our primary assessments. In this story, 3 Letters from Teddy, by this 5th grade teacher, she realized from the first day that Teddy, stepped into her classroom, she disliked him. This is a quote from this story, 3 Letters from Teddy. Teachers, although everyone knows differently, are not supposed to have favorites in a class, but most especially are they not to show dislike for a child, any child. Nevertheless, every year there are 1 or 2 children that one cannot help but be attached to, for teachers are human, and it is human nature to like bright, pretty, intelligent people, whether they are 10 years old or 25. And sometimes, not too often, fortunately, there will be 1 or 2 students to whom the teacher just can't seem to relate. This story from 3 Letters from Teddy describes this 5th grade teacher's journey with her student Teddy. Once she got to know his student and know his story, she put all the emphasis on the world on his education and had a great impact on his life. Something that I was lucky enough to learn in high school is that everyone has a story, and it is extremely difficult to judge someone once you know their story. This teacher-to-student relationship is a crucial component that makes up educational psychology. Educational psychology can be defined as the elements that help the teacher to understand the development of his pupils, the range and limits of their capacities, the processes by which they learn, and their social relationships. Essentially, it entails all of the elements of a classroom that help the teacher serve his or her students to the best of their ability. One example we saw in class was the video of Dan Meyer during his talk about perplexity. As educators, it will be our job to not only teach our students the curriculum, but also to make them excited about learning new knowledge about our world. Dan Meyer displayed an excellent way to do this by capturing, sharing, and resolving perplexity to his students about a topic, or by finding out what perplexed them and creating his lesson around that theme. This method of teaching is a great way to attract your students to a subject rather than teaching them topics that don't excite them. As a future English teacher, Dan Meyer's example of the common grammar mistakes is something that would fit well into my classroom. I love that he focuses on real-life application in his lesson, which I believe is something that is lacking in our current education system. We're teaching students so much about the world, but we're not really teaching them how to apply it and how to use it once they get out of school. This English example, showed some common grammar mistakes. In his example, he shows the sentence, "Let's eat, Grandma." Without the comma, that sentence means something totally different. Let's eat Grandma. You can see in this sentence on the screen as well, I like cooking, my family, and my pets. Without that comma after cooking, this sentence is not what the person intended it to say. I like cooking, my family, and my pets is rather the emphasis. And you can see this person became a psycho after displacing those simple commas. Along with knowing what interests your students, it is also important to know how your students learn best in a classroom, such as visually, kinesthetically, or logically. These intelligences are just a few of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, which is just one theory of how different people learn. Gardner's theory states that while we can all see the world and know the world through language, music, the use of the body to explain things, or an understanding of ourselves as well as other individuals, the difference in each individual is in his or her strength in these intelligences. This learning theory is incredibly important to us as future teachers because, according to Gardner, all of these differences challenge an educational system that assumes that everyone can learn the same materials in the same way and that a uniform, universal measure suffices to test student learning. It is clear that our educational system is set up to favor the linguistic and logical mathematical model of learning, such as using words effectively and analyzing a certain math problem. Our students are lectured for a few weeks, then they are tested on that knowledge, and with this, not much time passes before they forget everything. It is very much the one-size-fits-all method of learning, which, as we've learned through statistics and tests, it's not the best way to teach our students. It's important that teachers acknowledge that students can be smart in multiple ways, such as music, body kinesthetic, interpersonal, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, naturalistic, intrapersonal, and visual spatial. Personally, I am an interpersonal as well as an interpersonal intelligence. I like to use my body and I like to use visual, but I'm not so much a music or a picture or logic person. Allowing myself to use my different intelligences is how I learn best, and it's how many students learn best. So as future teachers, we should acknowledge that there are different ways to teach students. Teachers should know how his or her students work and learn best and cater their teaching to the preferred or most effective methods. Another important aspect of the classroom considers the impact of external factors, parents, and society on personality development from childhood to adulthood. With an interest to teach high school students, the issue of moral development is of high importance to me. While it is our job to teach our students what they need to know in order to be more knowledgeable, it is also important to teach them how to make a positive impact on the world. I will teach my students how to become better people through English. One theorist who greatly impacted and contributed to the field of moral development is Erik Erikson with his stages of development. Erik Erikson outlined 8 stages from childhood to adulthood that correlate to a specific time period of a person's life. For example, between the ages of 0 to 18 months, an infant is in their basic trust versus mistrust stage. This is the time when a baby will develop optimism, trust, confidence, and security through a nurturing environment from their mother and father. Stage 5, on the other hand, or the period of adolescence, is the period from which a person is 12 to 18 years of age. This period will greatly impact my career as a high school student because this is where a majority of my high school students will be. In adolescence, a person is struggling to discover and find his or her own identity while negotiating and struggling with social interactions and fitting in, as well as developing a sense of morality and right from wrong. This is when an adolescent is focusing on their self-image. This can be important to me as a high school teacher because this will affect how they perform in the classroom. If a student is worried about how they appear to their friends and to their peers, that's going to impact how they participate as well as how they interact in my classroom. In conclusion, if I were to leave you with one thing from today, it's that there's no such thing as not being smart, which is one topic that we learned and stressed in our celebration, as well as in other lessons this semester. As teachers, it's important to help our students advance and not to make everyone uniform. We have to acknowledge that there's multiple ways to learn, to socialize, and that there's multiple backgrounds in which people come from. I love the takeaway from our guest speaker, Kinda, telling her story about her IEP and her education impact. As a future teacher, I will definitely stress the goal of inclusion in my classroom. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't belong or that they're not learning well enough because I'm only focusing on one area of education. I hope you learned something, and I hope that this was a great celebration. Thank you.